I don't know what most white people in this country feel. I can only include what they feel from the state of their institutions. Now, this is the evidence. You want me to make an act of faith, risking myself, my wife, my woman, my sister, my children, on some idealism which you assure me exists in America, which I have never seen.
Welcome back to another episode of Black History for White People, a podcast where we educate, resource, and challenge white people about Black history. I'm Brad, and on today's show are my co-hosts Katina and Garen. Today's episode is on the Black Panthers. We first go through the historical setting of the beginning of the Black Panther Party, who they were, what tactics they were using, what tactics they used, and what they did. And then we cover how the government responded and then how the Panthers ended. We hope you enjoy the discussion. Okay, Garen, paint the picture for us. Where are we at in history and the beginnings of the Black Panthers?
So we recorded an episode on redlining, and if you haven't already listened to that, that would actually be kind of a good foundation for understanding the Black Panthers. So I'd send the listeners back there. If you already have listened to that, this was kind of during the height of the redlining era and kind of the urban oppressed inner city where you had, through mass migration, you had millions, something like 6 million Black people moved from the south up to moved up north and also west to try to find a new life outside of Jim Crow. And then they were kind of forced into these inner cities where there was like all kinds of unjust laws and oppressive laws. And so there was just a lot of angst among Black youths who realized that the future is not open to us. And so that was kind of like one of the roots of the Black Panther movement. Also, you had during this era, just like the civil rights movement kind of ran up against some limits to what it could really accomplish. So the civil rights movement was really effective at pushing back against legal discrimination. So where there were laws that were unjust, the civil rights movement could just kind of peacefully oppose those laws through nonviolence, and then white police officers, white people would brutalize the Black people who were engaging in the peaceful protest. That would cause sympathy from the larger watching world, and then those laws would get changed. But the civil rights movement couldn't really do much to push back against just kind of de facto segregation, just the daily ways in which white people hired only white people, and not because it was a law saying you could only hire white people, but because it was just the practice. And the ways that white people were just racist and would just show favoritism, like white life insurance companies would say like, no, we're not going to pay out on that policy because we think this man committed suicide, even though he was killed by a mob. Like the injustices that would happen that weren't so much law, but just like people making decisions. The civil rights movement didn't really have a good way to address those. And so then there was, because of that, the Black Panthers was kind of like a continuation or a branch off of the civil rights movement that tried to take on these other forms of discrimination. Also, there was extensive police violence against Black people. There was almost completely white police forces. The police were just at the beginning of being integrated. So you had police forces that were almost entirely white going into red line districts that were 100% Black and just using brutal police tactics to arrest, harm, and often kill Black people. So there was a lot of angst from that. And then also this was during the era of Vietnam. And during Vietnam, there was just a lot of friction within society in general. Something like 10% of men eligible for the draft were drafted during the Vietnam era. So this was the era of draft dodging. And there was like not a lot of popular support for the war. Film was showing just kind of how dirty and messy war was in kind of a new way, just as more and more film and cameras were able to show the horrors of war. So there's just like, that's kind of the setting.
What years is this again?
So the late 60s, really kind of starting 67 through 72 were kind of the peak years of the Black Panther movement.
Okay. And then, so I think most of our listeners probably have the same picture in their head of the Black Panthers, and most of that comes from just like what they hear in culture and also maybe what they saw in Forrest Gump, and that there's this Black Panther party. And I think even myself growing up, I grew up in the South, but it was Florida, so I don't know if a lot of people would consider that the South, even though it's like physically the South. Would say that the Black Panthers are like this terrorist organization. And so maybe we can start to talk about how they started, because you're kind of almost painting a picture that they are trying to have some solutions for some actual real problems that are good. And so I feel like at some point our listeners, framework in their head of the Black Panthers and what you guys are about to talk about are going to clash. And so I'm excited about that, but maybe we can start to talk about how did it start, now that we know what was happening in the background of society, what actually happened to begin it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the, it's a common belief that the Black Panthers are the Black equivalent to the KKK, which is a complete lie. Mm-hmm. So go ahead, Garen.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Black Panthers, who were they? First of all, the reason why they're called the Panthers, they kind of chose the panther as a kind of a mascot or a symbol. And the whole reason behind that was because the panther is, that in their words, they said the panther is like a strong animal, but it doesn't just go attacking people, but if you back it into a corner, it will fight fiercely. So that was kind of the idea, is they didn't want to just go in guns blazing, but they wanted to basically stand up against white oppression and say we will fight to defend ourselves if you attack us. And so one of the early tactics that basically led to the Black Panthers was that they would do armed patrols of the police. So they started in Oakland in California. And there were open carry laws where you were allowed to carry a weapon as long as it was showing. And the Black Panthers early on, they learned the exact laws and exactly what was and wasn't in bounds and what their rights were when stopped by the police. They learned what police can and can't do. So oftentimes police would just take advantage of the fact that Black people in the areas they were policing just didn't know what their rights were. But the Black Panthers learned their rights, and then they would enforce them with even through threat of violence. It oftentimes didn't overflow into violence, but there are times when it did. There's a little bit of messiness to the history of the Black Panthers, because there's also just diversity within the movement itself, where some Black Panthers wanted more to operate within the legal framework and system to effect change, and others wanted more to do a full revolution, even using kind of guerrilla tactics. But the leadership of the Black Panthers never went in the direction of full-on guerrilla tactics. The organization, the official structure of the organization, always kind of stayed within the limits of the law. And there were times that it overflowed into violence, but that was pretty much always the Black Panthers. At least they're sometimes the two sides would give different accounts, but the Black Panthers would say we were acting in self-defense. And there are times where it's actually quite obvious that the Black Panthers were just operating in self-defense, and where you can see the government and the police accusing the Black Panthers of having provoked violence. But then actually through journalism that was contemporary to that time, you can see no, actually the police attacked first.
So who started it? Are these just kind of normal people?
Yeah.
Were they leaders in some organization? Yeah, who was it?
Well, Huey P. Newton, who is also my fraternity brother, was one of the founders. And the Black Panthers, and I know a Black Panther personally who is a registered nurse. Everyday people, students, having just everyday, very akin to the Black Lives Matter movement that we're seeing now was the Black Panther movement. They were the forerunners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess the kind of difference between the Black Lives Matter and Panther movement was that in the Panther movement, it was somewhat broader. It started off focused on police brutality, and so that's a strong link between the two. The Panthers were also just pushing against the fact that Black people in that day, discrimination was a lot more extensive, where Black people couldn't even go to a lot of colleges. There wasn't employment opportunities in redlining, but it's super similar kind of veins and themes that you'll see kind of connecting the movements. And part of the reason for the Black Lives Matter movement is the Black Panther movement, as successful as it was, and we'll kind of get into the fact that a lot of things actually did change because of the Black Panther movement.
Yep.
Part of why they went away was precisely because of concessions that the government made in order to try to take the coal off the burner. But a lot of the police brutality didn't get addressed, didn't get solved, didn't get fixed. And so here we are, 1 or 2 generations later, still dealing with some of the same issues.
Right. Well, and the thing about the Black Panthers was that they used the Constitution and they used law. They basically put it back up as a mirror because those rights weren't being upheld or uplifted for Black people. So they held it up and said, okay, our right to open carry, our right to, they use the Constitution, they use, state law, they put it back in America's face, knowing that America didn't create those laws for African Americans. They didn't create those laws for, poor people. And another thing about the Black Panther Party is that their slogan was all power, to all the people. They really rallied for America to uphold its laws and its, to uphold its laws for everyone. That it would be that whatever America was saying, I'm getting all tongue-tied, I'm sorry, but whatever the laws were, that they would be upheld for everyone and not, I'm sorry, y'all. I'm all over the place, but you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But go ahead.
No, you're good. So the Panthers had, just as far as what were their beliefs, what did they want? They had a 10-point program that in 1967, they kind of listed off 10 demands of the government. So this kind of gives you an idea of what they saw themselves as standing for. They said, we want freedom. We want the power to determine the destiny of the Black community. We want full employment for our people. We want to end the robbery by capitalists of our Black community. We want decent housing, fit shelter for human beings. We want education for our people that exposes the true nature of the decadent American society, and we want education that teaches us our true history and the role of the present-day society and our role in present-day society. We want all Black men to be exempt from military service, and the reason why they wanted that was because they didn't think it made sense for them to fight to protect a country that oppressed them. And we want immediate end to police brutality and the murder of Black people. We want freedom for all Black men in federal, state, and county and city prisons and jails. We want all Black people, when brought to trial, to be tried by a jury of their peer group or people from their Black communities as defined by the Constitution of the United States. And for context for that, even today, all white juries are oftentimes used by prosecutors who will use their peremptory strikes to strike all the Black jurors from a jury pool. And all white juries are just known to be more likely to to convict and to give harsher sentences to black defendants. So even still today, there's this injustice that the Supreme Court actually created the Batson rule and said it's unconstitutional to strike all of the black jurors because they're black from a jury, but prosecutors still do it all the time. And basically they get away with it because unless you can prove that they're striking the black jurors because they're black, there's no way. And how do you prove that? How do you prove that they're not striking them for other reasons?
When did that Batson rule officially happen?
I don't know the exact years on that, but Radiolab had a podcast called More Perfect that had a good episode on it. So if people want to search for More Perfect and kind of read about that or listen about that, they can get it that way. But yeah, so it's an unconstitutional practice that's still used even today. And then just finishing off the list of demands of the Black Panthers, they said the last one was, we want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace.
Yeah, I mean, those all seem pretty,
not KKK-ish.
Yeah, not KKK-ish, but also just I feel like most people would want those things.
And an advocacy for everyone, not just for black people. And that's the powerful thing about the Black Panther Party. But, they had a lot of enemies because they were black people mobilizing. And there was such a tremendous fear, especially when we're talking about the 60s. And there's already the civil rights movement going on. And you have Malcolm X. And you have these uprisings all over the country that are happening. And the Black Panthers, black men with guns, black people wearing all black with guns, exercising their right to open carry, but carrying guns, that's that strikes fear in the heart of white supremacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, if you're just taught to fear black people and then you see them with guns, I can't think of anything else you would even remotely think.
But seeing white people with guns is like an everyday thing, even now, on our square.
Yeah, we saw that.
Yeah, white people with guns is nothing but a black person with a gun. But just their boldness and just standing and calling for the law to be applicable to black lives. They were just really powerful. I have so much respect for the Black Panther Party, knowing the truth about them and not what, the media and basically white supremacists try to basically suggest, basically what white supremacy says that they are.
Yeah. So we've talked about kind of the time, how they began. So let's talk about what they did. So they wanted these 10 things are great. So how did they do it?
Yeah. So basically, in order to stand up to the police, first of all, that is just a revolutionary thing. And it did a lot for the black identity and pride of black people to be able to stand up to the police in a way that they hadn't before. Because think of it, all of America's history up until this point, black people were forced into a subservient, low kind of cowing position where if black people stood up to the police, they would be killed and lynched. If they stood up to any white person, they would be subject to lynching. And so this was the Black Panthers were kind of the first time in American history where black people could kind of, without getting lynched, stand up for themselves and say no, enough is enough. And so black people all across the country, even if they didn't join the Black Panthers, there was a sense of pride imbued in them by the fact that here are people who look like us who are saying enough is enough, and they're standing up and they're not getting cut down. And so there was a huge support for the Black Panthers from the whole black community. And then they also had other support because they opposed the draft. So they had white liberal support. And also they opposed colonialism overseas. So they actually even had international support.
They did.
International allies, international press. And because of all this support and press, and because they published a magazine that had 150,000 subscribers during its height.
Wow.
There was a lot of media attention on them. And because of all that attention on them, the government and the police were not able to oppress them all that much because they had too many allies. And so basically they had this kind of mixture of all this support enabled them to stand up against injustice and brutality, which caused more support to come, because then people saw like, oh, they're actually standing up and not getting cut down. So like so it kind of became like a feedback loop. And it would draw in even more support, but then it would draw in even more government concern and police oppression,
just
which
more
would draw
eyes
more
on
support. Yeah, and draw more eyes, more attention. And so, but they didn't just do armed patrols of the police. They actually did a lot of social services for the Black community.
Community outreach.
That the Black community couldn't get from, or wasn't getting from, the government. So this is a quote. People came with every problem imaginable. When people had been badly treated by the cops, or if parents were demanding a traffic light in North Philly streets where their children played, they would come to our offices. In short, whatever our people's problems were, they became our problems. People brought all kinds of problems to them, job-related conflicts, evictions, rent, like struggles paying rent, gang violence, safety concerned, legal and criminal justice problems. Whenever there were consumer complaints, just like businesses taking advantage of people, issues with government or social services, public and private utilities, the underworld economy, the Black Panthers became kind of like the internal justice system for Black urban centers that were not given justice by the official system. They became kind of like a counter system to seek justice and reparations within these urban centers. And they also started all kinds of community programs that just gave away food and resources. They had a free breakfast program that they had offices in like 68 cities across America. And pretty much every one of these had a free breakfast program that just gave free breakfast to kids. They also had, let me just read out some of these programs. They had liberation schools, free health clinics, free food distribution program, free clothing program, child development centers, free shoe program, free busing to prison program, the Sickle Cell Anemia Research Foundation, free housing cooperatives, free pest control program, free plumbing and maintenance program, renters assistance, legal aid, senior escort program, and the free ambulance program. And all of these weren't all programs that were in every one of those 68 offices, but most of the bigger cities would have multiple programs that were offering like practical help and needs to the Black community.
What's so crazy, though, is that J. Edgar Hoover, he, of course, was he railed against the Black Panther Party because of his fear of what he called the Black Messiah. There was just this fear with the FBI of, Black people mobilizing, and specifically, Black male leadership that would mobilize Black people against white supremacy.
Who is that again?
He was like the director of the FBI. And so what's interesting is that even though the government was completely against the Black Panther Party, the Black Panther Party, there were so many things that they implemented, the Black Panther Party implemented, like the breakfast program, that the government, different state government, local governments, that they would implement some of the things that the Black Panther Party had originated. And that's the crazy part. Like the free breakfast program, that's been, implemented across the country in different school districts, as well as the Head Start program. That was started by the Black Panther Party. So it's crazy that, the Black Panther Party is, started off college students, Huey P. Newton, Bobby Seale. They were both college students. They found this organization that has global impact and shines a light on white supremacy. The government is against them. But then after demonizing and criminalizing them and killing a lot of them, infiltrating, their ranks, they then turn around and implement the things that, originated under the party, under the organization. It's nuts.
Yeah, well, and it was directly in response to an attempt to take support from the Black Panthers. So the Black Panthers won a ton of support from the Black community. Even those who didn't join still saw them favorably, and that support is part of what the government was trying to erode. And so simultaneously, I'll just read this. The U.S. government spent only $600,000 on breakfast programs in all of 1967, kind of at the front end. But then by 1972, after the height of the Black Panthers, the government-sponsored programs were feeding 1.2 million children. And then simultaneously, the police harassed people in facilities that participated in the Panther food programs. So there was this two-pronged approach of the government will provide what the Panthers are providing, so it's coming from us rather than them, and we'll oppress them and the facilities or people who participate in their programs. So it was just kind of like an obvious attempt by the government to kind of take away the support from the Black Panthers by kind of providing an alternative. But then still, you got to kind of credit the Black Panthers then with those changes.
Exactly.
Because it was because they were doing it that the government kind of, took the baton and actually got prompted and spurred into providing those services.
Yeah, and what was so interesting is that everything, so many things that the Black Panther Party did were so constitutional that the government is great idea, but because you're Black people, we're going to steal the idea and try to squash the Black people. It's just mind-boggling.
I mean, as you know, I've always said that I feel like I'm the target audience for this podcast. It's almost mind-blowing how opposite my view of, not just this topic, but I feel like most topics we talk about shifts. And just from the things that we've already talked about with the Black Panthers, I'm with you, Katina. It's why would people be against this? And I think that's a great question to kind of ask yourself. Why would the government be against them providing meals for kids in schools? Really think about it. I don't think there's here's the exact reason. I think there's multiple reasons probably for that, but I think it's just good for you to do some self-examining. Why wouldn't they want that to happen?
Especially for communities that they weren't meeting that need for. If you're the government and there's a group of people that's doing things for their community that you aren't doing, that's something that you don't have to do. So why are you infiltrating? They planted moles. They planted, there was this Operation COINTELPRO, which I'm sure Garen is going to talk about. But it speaks to white supremacy and the desire that Black people not mobilize. There's a history of demonizing any effort to uplift Black people, and Blackness, the social construct of Blackness being created by America in the first place by whiteness, and then for people who are under that oppression to come together and want to serve their community is something that's seen negatively because they want to keep their knees on our necks. It's just that simple. It's tragic. It's sad, but it's just that simple. And then of course to have this revisionist history, because you hear this a lot. The Black Panthers are just the KKK. So are you acknowledging the horror of the KKK? Are you going to acknowledge that since you're saying that the Black Panthers are the Black KKK? But of course they were absolutely not anything, they were the complete opposite of the KKK, so much so that America has modeled many of its, many programs and gleaned a lot from, how the Black Panther Party operated.
Do you know about that? What was that?
COINTELPRO?
Yeah, what is that?
Let's go into that. So Hoover, like Katina mentioned, was in charge of the FBI and kind of came up with a multi-pronged approach to try to get rid of the Black Panthers. So the Black Panthers were considered a threat to the government. They were doing armed patrols of the police, which the police didn't like, but also the Black Panthers, they basically wanted things to change, and nobody likes change, especially if you're on top of the current system, then you want to stay on top, so you want to conserve the current system. And so they didn't want change. And also the black people in the Black Panthers were kind of making demands of the government to like even things like there were some people within the Black Panther movement that were saying like we should be kind of given like land and talking about reparations. And it was just like the government was afraid that there would be a black revolution and black people kind of like demanding equality, which was, I guess, scary to them, although it doesn't seem like it should be. So Hoover fought against them by there was this operation within the government called COINTELPRO, and there were I'll read some of the things that Hoover kind of like wrote a letter. So this is going to be quotes. Step 1: prevent the coalition of militant black nationalist groups. In unity there is strength, a truism that is no less valid for all of its triteness. An effective coalition of black nationalist groups might be the first step toward a real Mau Mau, Black Revolutionary Army, in America, and the beginning of a true black revolution. So step 1 was keep all these black nationalist groups from uniting. Step 2, prevent the rise of a black messiah who could unify, electrify the militant black nationalist movement. Malcolm X might have been such a messiah. He is a martyr of the movement today. Martin Luther King, Stokely Carmichael, and Elijah Muhammad all aspire to this position. Elijah Muhammad is less of a threat because of his age. Elijah Muhammad we'll get into actually in a couple more episodes. We'll be talking about him more when we talk about Malcolm X. And he said King could be a very real contender for this position should he abandon his supposed, this is in quotes, obedience to white liberal doctrines like nonviolence and embrace black nationalism. Carmichael has the necessary charisma to be a real threat in this way. Step 3, prevent violence on the part of black nationalist groups. This is of primary importance and is, of course, a goal of our investigative activity. Step 4, prevent militant black nationalist groups and leaders from gaining respectability by discrediting them to 3 separate segments of the community. The goal of discrediting black nationalists must be handled tactically in 3 ways. You must discredit these groups, and again, this is Hoover writing to the FBI. So he's saying you must discredit these groups and individuals to, first, the responsible Negro community. Second, they must be discredited to the white community, both the responsible community and to liberals who have vestiges of sympathy for militant black nationalists simply because they are Negroes. Third, these groups must be discredited in the eyes of Negro radicals and followers of the movement. The last area requires entirely different tactics than the first 2. Publicity about violent tendencies and radical statements merely enhances the black nationalists of the last group. It adds respectability in a different way. So that was like the memo that Hoover sent out, like strategically seeking to discredit and get the FBI to discredit the movement. So what did they actually do to try to discredit them? Well, one of there's a lot of things that they did, but one of the things that they did that is just kind of like a striking example of the ends to which the FBI then would go to try to discredit and disrupt the Panthers. In addition to like sending in spies and infiltrators, there's a memo that they sent in 1969. The FBI authorized the sending of a fake memo that was deliberately trying to incite violence between the Black Panthers and a street gang. So they sent a memo to this street gang that said, quote, "Brother Jeff, I've been spending some time with some Panther friends on the west side lately, and I know what's been going on. The brothers that run the Panthers blame you for blocking their thing, and there's supposed to be a hit out for you. I'm not a Panther or a Ranger, just black. From what I see, these Panthers are out for themselves and not black people. I think you ought to know what they're up to. I know what I'd do if I was you. You might hear from me again." So they authorized this fake letter to be sent to the street gang saying that the Panthers were going to put a hit on one of their leaders in order to try to like start violence between the two, to then be able to turn around and talk about the violence of the Panthers and use that to discredit them. So, I mean, just kind of crazy to think about. Like,
yeah. Wow.
Our FBI sent a letter to a street gang with a lie in it, saying that the Panthers were going to take a hit out on them. I mean, just it's kind of shocking.
Yeah.
In another incident, the police broke into a Black Panther house and killed Fred Hampton and Mark Clark, 2 Panthers, while they slept. And then the Ed Hanrahan, the state's attorney, so the guy tasked by the police with kind of representing the police, he said, quote, "The immediate violent criminal reaction of the occupants when shooting at announced police officers emphasizes the extreme viciousness of the Black Panther Party. So does their refusal to cease firing at the police officers when urged to do so multiple times." So that's the white narrative. But then, reality check. The Black Panthers didn't shoot at the white police officers. The white police officers broke into the house firing, and the New York Times actually did some good investigative journalism on this and found that all the bullet holes in the house were where the Panthers were. There weren't any bullet holes or shell casings indicating that the Panthers had even fired on the police. Panther survivors hold that the police gave no warnings when they came in shooting. Bobby Rush said this was no shootout. Nobody in the apartment had a chance to fire a gun, and we can prove it by the fact that there are no bullet holes outside in the hallways or outside, just big gaping holes in Fred's bedroom where they fired on him. New York Times said, quote, "Most of the rooms and walls appear to be free of scars, pockmarks, and bullet holes. There were clusters of bullet holes and gouges of shotgun blasts in the places where the Panthers said that the 2 men had been killed and the 4 others had been wounded. There were no bullet marks in the area of the 2 doors through which the police said that they entered." Hanrahan then released through the Chicago Tribune photos showing supposed bullet holes that showed that the Black Panthers had fired back. But then the New York Times did further investigation and found that those bullet holes were not even real, that the photos were like doctored and fake. Let me see if I can find the quote here. Okay, the New York Times determined that many of the photos were deceitful. One depicted nail heads in the kitchen door jamb rather than bullet holes. Another photo that the police claimed showed bullet marks on the outside of a bathroom door actually depicted the inside of a bedroom door. So then, Fred Hampton's parents had a memorial service for their slain son, and 5,000 people came and attended. And Reverend Ralph Abernathy, the head of the SCLS, said, "If the United States is successful in crushing the Black Panthers, it won't be too long before they crush the SCLS, the Urban League, and any other organization that's trying to make things better." And you see, just like the Black community rallied around the Panthers because they knew that this is like a false narrative of Panther violence that's being spewed, when in reality it is the government that was being like oppressive and deceitful and
corrupt.
Corrupt.
Yeah. And what's crazy is that even after, I would say the so-called glory days of the Black Panther, when the Black Panther Party, when some things tapered off because of all of the things that they had to deal with and some internal issues that they had. Like Huey P. Newton they continued to come at him. They would trump up charges about him, killing a prostitute, or him doing, and this man, he got a PhD. Like he continued his studies and got a PhD as he was being retrialed and trumped up charges. It was really crazy. I keep going back to what about Blackness is such a threat? I mean, what about Blackness is such a threat that you have to continue harassing these people past the civil rights movement, and just to try to make their lives a living hell just because, what is it about Black people in America that we have to be suppressed and our stories have to be altered, and, you would have to, mock up images or fake images in a case? How un-American and how unconstitutional is that? It's just, I don't know. Their story, I'm fascinated by the Black Panthers for so many reasons. And I followed their story. And of course, like I said, I know people that have been that were in the party in Oakland. And it's just amazing how their lives are just everyday people, college students, folks living in their communities. Many of them are the sons and daughters of sharecroppers, and they were furthering the cause of civil rights in their own way, and that the government, American government, would be spying on them, tapping their, phones, and it's just. I mean, I really wish that instead of people just jumping to conclusions, one, that they would learn the truth about things, which is why we have this podcast, to challenge people's ideas about things. But then ask the question, like Brad was saying, like, ask the question, why is what we know or what we think we know different from what is? And why were these people, gunned down? Why are they on a government list? Why? It's like, it's just mind-blowing.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, the Panthers, sometimes when people are oppressed and have no recourse through the official channels, which they didn't, there were times when the Panthers used violence to get what they wanted. And to some degree, it's that's kind of understandable. It's not justifiable, where we would condone it. But it's if the official system is not giving you justice, then what do you do? And it's to just attack the Black Panthers for armed confrontation at times with the police, without realizing no, they were like a panther backed into a corner, and there was no access to justice through the court systems at that time. Then it's for people to just hear that and to think that it was the Black Panthers were the problem, not that the system was broken. It's just the wrong conclusion. And it's the same thing today with the Black Lives Matter movement. It's this system needs to change. And so...
And that brings up a good... I feel as a white person, I mean, I can't even imagine my rights and the systems that I'm a part of not being just. I mean, I can't even, to some degree, even empathize in a small amount with that. What you're saying of basically a group of people that get oppressed so much that even going through the, quote, this is huge air quotes here, just, process of even saying, hey, we're being oppressed, or we want equal rights,
or defending themselves.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's I can't even imagine that. I think part of it is that we can't even we can't. I don't even know what that's like, where I can't even empathize with it, and so it's probably just really scary and it's uncomfortable for white people, and I always want to try to, as much as we talk about, because I don't want to get pinned on us just we hate America and everything we did was bad. But like you've said plenty of times, I don't want to so blindly follow my patriotism that I don't see, the unloving things that our country has done. Mm-hmm. Because I think not recognizing that and not knowing that, and especially knowing it and then kind of just not dealing with it, isn't loving. That actually is not loving. You're not loving someone or even something, a system, a country, a state, if you are not going to deal with the hard parts of.
But just think about this, patriotism is rooted in privilege. White people should love America because America benefits them. And even the poorest white person is not going to be oppressed because they're white. Black people, we're patriots in that we are pressing this country to uphold its systems on our behalf as well. Mm-hmm. For that system to give us equal access. And so I feel the true patriotism is for those of us who are fighting for the country and for the systems to work for everyone. And to me, that's what makes the Black Panther Party so amazing. To me, they are heroes. I mean, they weren't perfect, but what system is perfect? But if we can look at groups like, and there's freedom of speech, there's freedom of expression. If groups like the Proud Boys and the KKK have a place in America to uphold the privilege of whiteness, Black people who came to this country on slave ships, for us to take the systems that were created to oppress us and to challenge the country to reverse those systems, and that we can benefit from. That's true patriotism. For Black people to fight in war, like go to war and serve in the military, knowing that because some Black Panther members were former military, like people who had served their country. And so for them to serve, and fight for our country in other places, in other lands, but then challenging our country to see us as equal, like, to me, I feel like we have a warped view of what patriotism truly is. And I feel like the people that we should be heralding as patriots are not white people. Like, because patriots of what? Patriots of you get everything you want? You know what I'm saying? It's the people who are oppressed, who are challenging the country and challenging the systems that have been elevated to oppress. And for us to be pressing into that, and that's love of country. Wanting when you love your country, you want your country to uphold what it represents. And to me, like, this false sense of patriotism of, God, guns, and glory, or make America great again, or, just like, it's just crazy. Like, you're living in a glass house and you have these other people who don't benefit from the system, have been oppressed by the system, challenging our country to be, America the beautiful, God, liberty and justice for all. Like, these are the true patriots.
Yeah, I think and we've gone back to this a few times, but yeah, is patriotism loving the ideals of America and challenging America to live up to them? Or is it loving America as it is and pretending like it doesn't have any issues? And I think it's definitely the former. I just want to this was kind of like a thought I had the other day that specifically for the Christians, but again, everyone's invited into this. In the Bible, there is just this constant reflection on the failings of God's people. And it's not hidden, where you have, like, the Israelites had these, like, psalms that were, like, they would just sing these songs in their community reflecting on all their past failures. Like, why did they do that? Why did God's people remember back to, was it because they were hating on their own Israelite identity? Like, no, they weren't afraid to admit all the ways that they had failed in the past. And they even wrote songs about and memorialized and remembered it. Because they didn't, like, have this false idea like we have oftentimes today that we have to, like, pretend like we're perfect. They had a relationship with God, and they were, like, seeking to not go back and make the same mistakes and repeat those failings. And so they memorialized it and remembered it so that they could be better and change. That's a challenge to, like, if you're a Christian, like, the Bible does not dress up the failings of God's people. And so we need to, like, model ourselves after that and not, like, be afraid to take a deep look at the way that we, like, in America, and then also, like, we in the church have been, like, so complicit in all of this, and all of this history.
Yeah, and if you walk away from this podcast thinking that we hate America, like, that's so false. I mean, Jesus looked over his country and his people, and he wept. The scriptures record that, and Paul said that he would, take one for the team if all his brethren would be saved. Mm-hmm. To me, that's like the true patriotism. That's the true love of country. That's the true love of your people. Is to see them flourish in the way that they should, and to call out those issues where they're not being their best, the best version of themselves. And I feel like that's what this podcast does. in Black history for white people is that we're, one, telling the truth. We're being truth tellers, and we're calling our listeners to hear and listen to the truth and not what they've been fed. We're calling us to undo the work of white supremacy and racism in our view and in our hearts. But then, we're calling for our listeners to take action by taking what like what you can read and what you have access to. Like, you don't even have to listen to us. You can go, what we say, you can fact check. And by taking that and letting that spur you on to action, for Christian listeners, in the name of Jesus, to walk in that truth, and which I think is the greatest measure of love, for your fellow man, for your country. I feel like it's the greatest act of being patriots, of patriotism.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's wind this down. Where are the Black Panthers today? What happened? Where did it end?
Yeah, so it faded out largely because of concessions that the Black Panthers gained for Black America. And so there was kind of three allies. There was like the allies were the kind of moderate Black community, the international allies, and the the liberal anti-draft community. Well, so the draft ended. Nixon kind of wound that down, ended the draft, and so that community kind of ceased to be an ally for the Panthers. The international relationships kind of shifted and changed as kind of colonialism wound down, and so the international allies kind of broke their alliances with the Panthers because they wanted to have official U.S. government support, and so that kind of prong ended, and then the government basically made concessions to the moderate Black community in order to kind of break the strength of that alliance with the Panthers. And once all that support for the Panthers ended, the government was able to get away with more kind of brutal suppression tactics because there wasn't a spotlight on it. And so then the Panthers then basically just kind of faded away, both through the loss of support, financial support, and through they couldn't stand up against the government in the way that they could before. So it faded, but just to kind of focus in on some of those concessions that were made, Black people won electoral representation that they had not really had access to. I didn't realize this. Nixon actually passed a lot of affirmative action for Black communities, letting them get government jobs, government employment opportunities, college access. I did not know that had started through Nixon, but it was partly because he was trying to peel support away from the Black Panthers that he, passed some of those measures. So Black people gained employment opportunities, college access. The government started to do food programs and provide a lot of the support that the Black Panther programs had been providing. The draft wound down, international kind of alliances changed. So then the Black Panthers just kind of faded, but to some degree because they had accomplished their job in a way.
Well, and I think that they were weakened by the government because there was so much international attention on, during the 60s, there were so many different elements of civil rights and human rights going on from Black organizations and leaders, giving this international attention and saying, oh, America isn't all it's, chalked up to be. So then America is ashamed, ashamed to the point that it's we got to do something to better and improve relations and show people that we're not monsters. So then they do the status quo and the bare minimum, but some of those efforts were to weaken, Black organizations and leaders and systems that were set up to uplift Black people. And so with the Black Panthers specifically, that's what that was. It was more so, like you were saying, what the things that Nixon implemented. It was a part of, Lee Atwater was one of Nixon's people. And no, he was one of Reagan's people, but there was this, when we see the shift from the Democratic Party of the South shifting to the Republican Party, a lot of it was them trying to change the language so that they didn't appear overtly racist. And so that you see this shift that's happening, and then it's like this elusive type of racism where the language changes, but the systems are still in place. And so Black Panthers were weakened because it's like, we're going to give you what you want to this extent, and then we're going to continue to criminalize these people and harass these people, and then they just kind of disappear because Black success and, assimilation and opportunity and affirmative action happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, during historical context at that time there's this massive global kind of struggle between capitalism and communism, and America was trying to recruit countries towards capitalism, and Russia was trying to recruit companies towards communism. And the communists all around the world were using the imagery of oppression of Black people in America to recruit people to communism and
exactly.
say look, America is claiming to be like this beacon on a hill, but look how they treat minorities who look like you. Look at clearly here's what's actually going on under the hood over there. And it was successful propaganda showing the hypocrisy of America and of capitalism. And so then America then responded by addressing some of it and ending Jim Crow laws and ending some of the integration. But a lot of that was done not because Nixon had this soft spot in his heart where he had this change of heart and repented. It was done because he was tactically trying to be just the right amount of racist that met his goals, his the things he cared about. He was making concessions tactically, not because he cared at all about the Black community, but because it's what needed to happen to further his interests. And that's kind of been all along. There's never been a true repentance on the part of mainstream white America for things have gotten better over time because just for tactical or selfish reasons, white people wanted to hire Black people in factories because there was labor shortages, so Black people gained the right to work in factories. But it's not we're sorry for how we treated you, that we haven't let you work in factories. It's no, I need the labor, and I can hire you for half of what I can pay an immigrant who's white.
And so we see this shift where it's the same type of, it's basically slavery by another name, so to speak, or racism by other tactics. Because they have to grapple with, here we are, and we can't look bad. And like you said, communism, and America is so this is communist. This is there was so much of a tremendous fear of communism. So they can't be, they can't be looked down on by communists. So they have to placate.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I want to just say a couple of things about the Black Panther Party. One thing that they did that I really loved also, was that they amplified the voices of Black women, and they amplified, they pressed into this movement of Black beauty. Black is beautiful. Women being able to Black women wearing their hair naturally. Because Black women, we're pressing our hair, perming our hair, and perming back then, that was it was extremely dangerous, lye and all these harsh chemicals that we see now have impacted Black women's health systemically. But just this whole movement of beauty and self-love, of Black being beautiful, of Black women being beautiful, and and shifting the narrative about the standard of beauty. The Black Panther Party had such a tremendous impact on the Black is Beautiful movement.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Black History for White People. If you're looking for more information on what we discussed, take a look at the show notes or go to blackhistoryforwhitepeople.com. Remember that for $5 a month, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Black History for White People. There you can vote on monthly topics, have access to full interviews, and even get some behind-the-scenes video updates from us semi-monthly. On our next episode, we interview Harry Eady of the Denton African American Scholarship Foundation, and we present to him all the money that our patrons raised over the past 10 episodes. We leave you with this quote from Malcolm X. "You're not supposed to be so blind with patriotism that you can't face reality. Wrong is wrong no matter who does it or who says it."